Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Tickets Please. I'm your host, Josiah Wampfler. Today we are celebrating Pride Month with three excellent queer films that came out this spring. First up is director Luca Guadagnino's love triangle tennis film, Challengers. What does this slick sports film have to do with old Hollywood comedies, and what makes it so damn sexy? Then I'll talk about one of the boldest films of the year, I Saw the TV Glow. What makes director Jane Schoenbrun's sophomore feature such a singular achievement? And what does this trip down 90s TV nostalgia tell us about the trans experience? Finally, I'll wrap up with a review of the lesbian bodybuilding crime film, Love Lies Bleeding. After a successful debut with St. Maud, does director Roseglass's new collaboration with Kristen Stewart deliver the goods? It's all ahead on this episode of Two Tickets Please, so let's start by discussing Challengers. The love triangle is a common trope found in films of all kinds, from romantic comedies to dramas to shiny vampire movies. The triangle is nearly always comprised of two men who are infatuated with a woman. When director Luca Guadagnino received the script for Challengers by screenwriter Justin Kuritzkis, the tennis film's triangle fell largely within those bounds. Guadagnino, in making the film his own, wanted something a bit more outside the box. He wanted a love triangle in which all the sides touch. The undisputed top of Challenger's triangle is Tashi, played by Zendaya, with her two white boys, Art and Patrick, played by Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor respectively, rounding out this tangled triad. All three met when they were young, up-and-coming tennis players. Tashi quickly on her way to singles greatness, and Art and Patrick trying to break out of their successful run as doubles partners. It is during that sexually charged initial meeting in which all the sides of this triangle truly touch. While the two boarding school friends are certainly competitive over their desire for Tashi, Art and Patrick's friendship cannot be read as purely platonic. As Guadagnino shows us throughout the film, there is a queer desire between the two men bubbling beneath the surface that neither can fully acknowledge. Patrick initially gets the upper hand in their competition over Tashi, but as she sees success in her college playing career and he travels on the professional circuit, they start to grow apart. Helped along by Art's scheming, they break up in dramatic fashion. When Tashi suffers a debilitating injury that ends her playing career, it is Art that is there to comfort her. The two eventually marry, and she becomes his coach, placing her hopes of tennis greatness in him. Years later, when Tashi enters Art into a small challenger series to build confidence after his own injury, they find their estranged third Patrick across the net, and they both must confront the desire that has inextricably linked them all together. Are we still talking about tennis? This is a repeated question throughout Challengers, and the answer is always yes and no. It's reflected brilliantly in Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross's transcendent house score, which almost exclusively underlines not the tennis action, but the contentious and spicy conversations these characters have. As Tashi says early in the film, tennis is more than just a game. It is a relationship. So while Challengers is certainly an incredibly erotic film, there isn't a ton of actual sex that we see. The eroticism comes through tennis. It's reminiscent of old Hollywood romantic comedies, which were limited in the sexual content that they could show, but found ways to evoke eroticism. While Guadagnino is obviously not bound by such restrictions, he clearly understands how sensual it can be to hide the ball a bit and create a sense of flirtatious foreplay within these conversations purportedly about tennis. It reminded me of the 1940 classic The Philadelphia Story, which also stars an equally ferocious threesome. Katharine Hepburn, Cary Grant, and James Stewart, was directed by a gay man, George Cukor, and uses the divorce of Hepburn and Grant's characters to skirt restrictions on extramarital relationships to create a love triangle film. Much like Art and Patrick in Challengers, Grant and Stewart's characters are similarly competitive over their affection for Hepburn's character. And though all sides don't officially touch, I read a slight bit of homoeroticism between Grant and Stewart at points. Challengers, free of restrictions, is a much steamier film that is far more blunt about its sexual content. But its main weapon, like The Philadelphia Story, is creative subterfuge. using its threesome's obsession with tennis to tease out the burning desire they have for one another. Guadagnino and Kiritzkis, through a masterfully constructed narrative that weaves back and forth across the timeline, use the pleasures of innuendo to craft a tremendously titillating experience that denies the audience release until the very end. Challengers is also incredibly funny, using its wit to both amplify the film's sensuality and ease the tension building between these characters. Like the trio in the Philadelphia story, Zendaya, Feist, and O'Connor are given exquisite material to work with that demonstrates their comedic chops and lends further depth to their characters. While all three are quite funny, O'Connor gets the juiciest material as the bad boy Patrick. I love when actors can communicate specific character traits through discrete choices, and O'Connor does that here masterfully. Patrick thinks of himself as the consummate cool guy, constantly flashing a wry smile that projects a carefree confidence, but his often unkempt appearance suggests a man that is not entirely in control. He is ruled by his desires and the deep insatiable hunger inside him, which O'Connor expresses through an oral fixation, whether that be his persistent smoking or constant eating. Guadagnino also uses this fixation to tease out the film's homoerotic subtext, often having Patrick fixate on very phallic objects. Art is, by contrast, more clean-cut and projects a more demure image of himself to the world. Both in his relationship with Patrick and later with Tashi, he is content to follow their lead. Guadagnino even teases out this dynamic visually in the ways that Art interacts with Tashi as an almost maternal figure at times. Art is also less driven than Patrick and Tashi, which Reznor and Ross express in their theme for him, which is a far more laid-back techno motif than the higher-tempo driving beats that Patrick and Tashi get. By the time of his challenger match with Patrick, Art has certainly proven himself to be the more consistent tennis player, with the help of Tashi's coaching, but has never reached the heights of a US Open title. Guadagnino continuously shows us moments of Art's mind wandering away from the action at hand, whether that be a shot of him longingly looking at the sunlight streaming through a window before a match, an overhead shot of him lounging back in his chair during a break in play, or a moment where he gets lost in thought during a conversation with Tashi and his theme music kicks in. Art may be a great tennis player, but his passion is waning. The competition he truly cared about was the one for Tashi's affection, and though he can't admit it, he and Patrick were never better than when they had each other as foils. Feist communicates all of this brilliantly. Tashi is the true alpha of the trio, and Zendaya absolutely shines in the role. She lends the character movie star charisma, incredible style, and a layered emotional core that draws you in despite her more questionable qualities. While she shows unmistakable desire for both men, none of it matches her desire to, as she says, see some good effing tennis. She'd kill to have a recovery like Art's, she says at one point, speaking to the carefully concealed sense of loss she feels for never being able to prove her greatness as a professional. That sense of loss is channeled into her coaching career with Art, who she is trying to will toward greatness she could never achieve herself. Throughout the film, Guadagnino makes a point to highlight the wealthy boarding school background of her two white boys against the more humble, middle-class upbringing Tashi had. Instead of starting her professional career right away, she goes to college so she has a degree to fall back on. Her mother travels with them as a nanny to her daughter, even though she could afford paid help. This stark class divide is a source of her antipathy toward Patrick, who is struggling in self-imposed financial hardship despite having the world handed to him on a silver platter. Throughout her life, she has had to seize control for herself to get where she's wanted to go, and her injury took that completely out of her hands. So she clawed back control in her coaching career with Art. But as the film progresses, it becomes clear that she is conflicted. She appreciates the moldable clay that Art is, but resents how dispassionate he has become about his game. And she is reviled by Patrick's unearned confidence, but is drawn to his passion. Her heart is torn between these two men. That conflict of the heart is essentially what Challengers is about. Wrapped up in this heavily stylized story about three messy people is a radical idea about love and relationships. You can call it non-monogamy, you can call it polyamory, but whatever the term, these three characters are drawn to each other as a trio. While all three could certainly do with some therapy to find healthier ways of interacting, it is undeniable that each is worse off without the other two. While Challengers leaves the ultimate resolution of this triangle open-ended, It is ultimately a fun, layered examination of the full spectrum of love and attraction. What truly makes Challengers magnificent is that all of this is conveyed through a heart-pounding, blockbuster-level sports film that manages to make tennis as exciting as a boxing match. Guadagnino treats each tennis scene like kills in an action film, always trying to show the audience something new. The cinematography is incredibly inventive, balls flying past the camera left and right, zooming around the court, panning across it, going under it, and even getting the POV of the ball itself. It is stunningly kinetic. And that energy is not only reserved for the action scenes, as Challenger's real game is being played in the conversations these characters have. In these scenes as well, Guadagnino amplifies the emotion by resisting simple shot-reverse shot coverage and heightening the character dynamics with his motivated framing. In one argument between Art and Tashi, he even cuts the exchange to resemble a tennis match. With this exciting, colorful visual style, one of the greatest movie soundtracks I've ever heard, 3 tremendous central performances, and a perfectly constructed script, Challengers absolutely blew me away. I was lucky to see it twice in IMAX, and each time was an absolutely exhilarating experience. I'm giving Challengers an easy 5 out of 5 stars. It is currently available on VOD. Throughout the history of cinema, queer folks have had to fight for inclusion and representation. Often relegated to laughable fools, monstrous villains, and characters that lack nuance and authenticity, that trend has thankfully been reversing for gay, lesbian, and bisexual people. Change has been much slower for trans folks, though, who have had to fight hard for the very recognition of their existence in popular culture. Though there have certainly been strides made in recent years, a huge problem has been the lack of transgender voices behind the scenes, which is why it is so encouraging to see the rise of director Jane Schoenbrun as not only a successful filmmaker, but a bona fide auteur. Schoenbrun, who is non-binary, garnered critical acclaim with their debut in 2021, a creepypasta-inspired psychological horror film called We're All Going to the World's Fair. They were able to parlay that into a deal with A24 to make their sophomore feature, I Saw the TV Glow, which was released wide in theaters this spring. While World's Fair has trans themes running through it, as well as Jane's special interest of the ways in which we interact with screens in the internet age, I Saw the TV Glow makes its trans allegory a bit more explicit. The film is also far more formally impressive, with Schoenbrun using that sweet A24 money to craft a visually stunning depiction of the trans experience that wears the influences of David's Cronenberg and Lynch proudly on its sleeve. Though like World's Fair, the film has been categorized as a horror film, Schoenbrun has proven themselves to be a wildly inventive and singular voice whose films defy simple genre classification. I Saw the TV Glow centers on Owen, played by Justice Smith, a socially awkward kid going through high school in the American suburbs. Long fascinated by a late-night supernatural adventure show on the young adult network called The Pink Opaque, Owen bonds with an older classmate, Maddie, over the show. Played by the captivating Bridget Lundy Payne, Maddie is an obsessive fan of the show and starts taping episodes for Owen since he is not able to stay up and watch it. The two are spellbound by this Are You Afraid of the Dark style show about 2 teenage girls using their mystical powers to fight a cadre of monsters of the week attempting to whisk them away to another dimension. Sometimes the Pink Opaque feels more real than real life, Maddie tells Owen at one point, and it's an observation that becomes far more true than either of them anticipate. The show becomes an escape hatch from the boredom of the suburbs and the pain of their family lives. But that escape hatch also soon becomes a mirror that they refract their very identities through, avoiding the horror of actually confronting their true selves. Then one day, Maddie disappears, and the Pink Opaque is unceremoniously canceled, leaving Owen alone to face all that he's been avoiding. The thing that I have adored about Schoenbrun's first 2 films is their incredible ability to communicate tone. In I Saw the TV Glow, a deep, ineffable feeling of isolation and melancholy pervades the entire film. It's a latent terror that has been with Owen for most of his life, and Schoenbrun masterfully brings us into that feeling. Visually, they do this through patient, deliberate camera movement, uncanny imagery that makes us question the nature of Owen's reality, and heavily shadowed lighting that adds to the near-constant feeling of dread. In addition, Smith and Lundy Payne speak in low, hushed tones that helps to convey the gloom that they feel inside, and suggests that they have a secret they aren't telling us, or themselves. In a word, Schoenbrun somehow communicates the feeling of dysphoria. It's a feeling that trans folks know well, and though I can't personally attest to the accuracy of Schoenbrun's depiction, scanning the reviews from trans people on Letterboxd, it seems I Saw the TV Glow pulled it off. One reviewer named Julie even used her review to come out as a trans woman, a not uncommon event in the reviews for this film. She wrote, "Watching I Saw the TV Glow tonight, I saw myself up there on screen in a way I never thought I'd see in a film. My exact experience with dysphoria had been perfectly, devastatingly articulated. It's a film rooted in the feeling of realizing your body isn't yours. Your life isn't yours. The memories you thought were happy and normal now feel false, like you were seeing someone else's memories the whole time, and you were just not a real person, a spectator in your own life." Reinforcing this depiction of dysphoria is what I like to call suburban malaise. Schoenbrun sets the entirety of I Saw the TV Glow in a nondescript hollow suburb of Anywhere, USA, and it is Owen's entire world. It's just the suburbs, Owen reassures Maddie at one point when she suggests that there is something much darker going on around them. The perfectly trimmed lawns, the sickening green hue that covers the walls of their high school, the empty streets, and the lonely houses that don't seem to have any occupants, there is something unnatural about their surroundings. Owen has lived his entire life here, but what if this eerie suburbia is a false reality? What if he is a stranger in a strange land? When we think of America's suburbs, we often think about the general concept of the American dream. A nice house with a white picket fence where a wife and husband reside with 2.5 children. It's an image of white cis heteronormativity, and it's the reason suburbia is often depicted as exclusionary to non-white and queer people. Owen is right, it is just the suburbs, and that's the problem. He is stuck in a reality that is not his own, a reality that rejects him. It is in the pink opaque where Owen and Maddie find their true reality. But while representation in pop culture is certainly valuable and can be a catalyst for understanding oneself, I Saw the TV Glow is a testament to that in itself, it can become a crutch. We can become so absorbed in living out our lives through the kinship we find in characters on screen that we fail to look inward. We can fight so hard for those characters to represent us that we fail to fight for real power to change our material circumstances. Maddie comes to understand this basic truth and takes action. For Owen, the journey is longer and more complicated, with Schoenbrun fearlessly depicting a trans coming out story that eschews the gloss Hollywood has often put on it, when they've deigned to depict it at all. The reality of coming out, or as trans folks say, of cracking your egg, is messy. As we see with Owen, it can happen in fits and starts, because of how terrifying the prospect is. Grappling with your gender identity means confronting yourself in a way that few of us are willing to do. It means accepting that everything you thought you knew about yourself is not entirely true. As Julie said, it means realizing that your body is not your own. On top of that, the external pressures are immense, as we live in a world in which rabid hatred for trans people is rampant. So it can feel easier to keep living the lie than face such an onslaught of bigotry from the outside world. Using the imagery of horror and examining the nostalgia of 90s kids' TV shows, Schoenbrun effectively submerges their audience into Owen's dysphoria and the dilemma he faces. The journey is not sugar-coated. It is difficult, chaotic, frightening, and it can take time. But ultimately, in Owen's story, Schoenbrun shows us both a cautionary tale of the alternative of continuing to live the lie, and the fulfillment that can come from finally living in your truth. I know from the experiences of my trans friends how arduous the process can be. There is still time, a colorful chalk design tells us, in one of the most transfixing shots of the entire film. Time for Maddie, time for Owen, and time for anyone who is questioning their sexual or gender identity. Everyone's timeline is different. Believe me, I know. I Saw the TV Glow is not always an easy sit. It forces you to grapple with its complex questions, deliberately attempts to perturb its audience, and Schoenbrun's style is incredibly specific in a way that likely won't work for everyone. But with excellent cinematography, a tremendous soundtrack, gripping performances, and a singular vision from an emerging auteur, I Saw the TV Glow offers a space to ponder deep questions of the soul and fulfilling representation for a community that is so often overlooked. In short, Jane Schoenbrun has made a film that represents everything I long for in cinema. I'm giving I Saw the TV Glow 5 out of 5 stars. It is currently available on VOD. Love Lies Bleeding, the sophomore feature from director Rose Glass, opens with 2 distinct images. As ethereal droning music fades in, we see an overhead shot of a giant crack in the earth. The image is tinted blood red, a pitch-black void at the center, slowly creeping closer as the camera moves downward. Anticipation and dread build. And then suddenly, the image dissolves into the beauty of the vast New Mexican night sky, the stars twinkling amidst the darkness of the void. The droning music turns to pulsating synths and drums as the camera tilts down to reveal the unassuming Crater Gym, where our sweaty, blood-soaked love affair begins. Love Lies Bleeding may be a film about love, but do not expect a romance. Love can feel joyous and fulfilling, as it often is portrayed in cinema. But Rose Glass is not interested in that portrayal of love. This love is dirty, it's addicting, it's all-consuming and frightening. It's exhilarating and painful, and Glass's characters will do anything to taste more of it. Kristen Stewart stars as Lou, a lone gym manager living a driftless existence in a small New Mexican town. She is no longer on speaking terms with her father, played by Ed Harris, a sinister old man with a gross skullet who owns a local gun range, and is likely responsible for a gun-running operation as well as several murders in the town. Lou feels stuck, afraid to leave her sister Beth, played by Jenna Malone, to deal with her abusive, short-tempered husband, JJ, played by Dave Franco. Enter Katie O'Brien's Jackie. Originally from Oklahoma, the aspiring bodybuilder is on her way to a competition in Las Vegas and has chosen Crater Gym as a pit stop to finish up her training. Lou is captivated by this muscular woman from the jump when she spots her from across the gym, and following an after-workout smoke and a performance-enhancing gift, the two find their way into bed. A steamy, riveting love affair ensues, but as Jackie ramps up her steroid usage in hopes of victory in Vegas, and Lou's family history rears its ugly head, things get complicated. The chemistry between the pair is absolutely electric from the very beginning. Stewart has long been an incredibly charismatic screen presence, but it's especially exciting seeing her play a queer character, and imbue Lou with an authenticity that is drawn from her own life. O'Brien, who has experience with bodybuilding but has had very few significant roles to this point, is a revelation, proving a perfect match for Stewart and delivering a truly powerhouse performance. To give you an idea of how engrossing this couple truly is, when I went to watch their incredible meet-cute at the gym in preparation for this review, I found myself at the end of the film almost without even realizing it. They just pull you in and never let go. The vibes that director Rose Glass delivers here are equally immaculate. While I dug her first film, St. Maud, Love Lies Bleeding is an even greater achievement for the young director. Her compelling focus on the human body throughout makes for incredibly sensual imagery that's not afraid to find eroticism in the sweaty, grimy details of human existence. With that, she delivers a dark, sexy crowd pleaser with incredible visual style, stunning sound design, a banger of a soundtrack, and a unique excavation of the darker sides of love. The cinematography from Ben Fordsman is superb. Leaning into the noir aspects of the story, he and Glass deliver high-contrast imagery with deep shadows and a grittiness that you can usually only achieve with celluloid. Perhaps one of the best examples of digital film emulation I've seen, the shadows fall off into deep, grainy blackness. A slight green hue covers the film, and it feels at times like the dirt of this world has smeared itself onto the image itself. That griminess permeates the entire film, as Glass presents us with a dark, damp, hollow version of the 80s that stands in stark contrast to the nostalgia-fueled, sanitized version of the decade we often get. Juxtaposed against the colorful fashion and the groovy music is a palpable sense of dread. Glass's 80s is a place of abandonment, where American prosperity is a thing of the past and the basic social contract has expired. Here, no one is keeping evil at bay. Evil is in charge. With that follows Glass's seedier appraisal of love that reminded me of one of my favorite songs from indie sad girl darling Phoebe Bridgers. In the chorus of her song Killer, Bridgers sings,
"Can the killer in me tame the fire in you? Or is there nothing left to do for us? I am sick of the chase, but I'm hungry for blood, and there's nothing I can do."
Here, Bridgers is speaking to an overwhelming burning desire for the love of another, one that has put her on an obsessive chase that feels homicidal. Throughout the song, she evokes gallows imagery to describe this hunger. Glass does much the same in Love Lies Bleeding, and in the process gives us a queer love story with far more imperfect and complex characters than we normally are used to seeing. While we are certainly rooting for the love affair between Lou and Jackie, Glass consistently juxtaposes their relationship against other forms of love to tease out her character's hypocrisy and the ways in which their emotions are clouding their judgment. Lou rightly is concerned about her sister's attachment to a man who constantly mistreats and abuses her, but overlooks the ways in which her love for Jackie is similarly leading down a dark path. Yet still, Glass also shows how dark the world can be when we shirk the responsibilities that love entails, as Lou's father is unwilling to take action to defend his daughter from her husband and ultimately turns on Lou to protect himself. Addiction is also a running motif throughout the film. For Lou, that addiction is cigarettes. For Jackie, it's steroids. As the two of them fall deeper into love and push the boundaries of what they are willing to do to keep that love, they give into their addictions more and more. Like in the Bridgers song, they chase after the euphoric feeling of love and lust, attempting to satisfy their insatiable hunger, even if that requires some blood to be spilled along the way. Yet even though Glass's characters do objectionable things, she is not scolding her audience for rooting for them. In fact, like many queer-coded films before it, Love Lies Bleeding finds a story of queer resiliency in the monsters Lou and Jackie become. Though Glass makes a point to have Lou's father have no problem with her being gay, his evil is of a different variety. I think the setting of the film provides deeper subtext. Lou at the start of the film is stuck in this small rural town filled with gun nuts and people who call her a grade A dieseler, a town she is tied down to in order to protect her sister from a toxic heterosexual marriage. Jackie, similarly, hails from rural Oklahoma and is estranged from her family, possibly because she is queer. Ultimately, though Love Lies Bleeding explores the full complexity of love and all its downsides, it also shows why Lou and Jackie fight tooth and nail for it. Glass's rendering of the 1980s as a dark, brutal period echoes the abandonment queer folks experienced during that decade, left for dead by their own government to suffer a horrible plague. Yet in the midst of all that despair and cast out from their communities, these two lesbian women found each other, and they will do whatever it takes to defend the love that they have found. Love Lies Bleeding is a welcome addition to the queer film canon that thankfully expands our representation into more genres and allows deeper complexity for its queer characters. It is also one of the best films of the year. I'm giving Love Lies Bleeding 5 out of 5 stars. It is currently available on VOD. That'll do it for this episode of 2 Tickets Please. You can find more of my written content at 2ticketsplease.substack.com. Thanks for watching.